Good evening, everyone. Welcome to part 2 of... I'm Julie Johnson, by the way. I'm one of the facilitators for this group. I am a special education teacher and a trauma-informed, public school teacher, and also a coordinator for the Fit Abilities yoga program in the Ferguson Florissant school district. So that is also facilitated with special school district. So it's a kind of a very collaborative program. There are two different school districts in St. Louis County. Let's see here. So in our last segment, we reviewed the foundations of building a trauma-informed yoga program in the schools based on the Fit Abilities version, me and Natasha Babler's experience and Bonnie Lenz, and kind of the roles we played. So we went through that in version 1, our roles, and also the relationships within the schools and how important those are. In this segment, we're going to go into our teaching philosophy and the basics of how that looks, the very bare basics of how it looks for us as a yoga program. Anyway, so this is kind of a combined effort between Natasha Babler of UD Yoga, UD for Yoga, she's a yoga teacher that specializes in accessibility, physical access and emotional access, yoga for all, despite however despite physical barriers, mental barriers, anything. And then Bonnie Lenz, a teacher of the visually impaired, and also me, Julie Johnson. I'm a teacher of the visually impaired, a trauma-informed public school teacher, and a assistive technology specialist. So, okay, so a brief info on the philosophy behind how our teaching philosophy. It's not just about how we teach yoga, it's also about how we teach the kids. So I just wanted to make that clear. So I think Natasha and I's teaching philosophy have to be intertwined as well. So I need to bring yoga into the way I interact with my students as well. It's not just how we teach yoga with the kids. It's also how we teach when we're not doing yoga, and we try to blend as much of those components together in our philosophy. Okay, so it's not just what's your trauma-informed yoga teaching philosophy. It's how do we bridge this philosophy together with everyone who's involved, between the teachers involved and also Natasha, the yoga teacher. So we have a nice philosophy that we teach through, and it's a combination of a trauma-informed teaching philosophy and a universal design for learning philosophy, which is why UD, this is actually the UD part of why Natasha calls her yoga universal design for learning. So I'll go through those a little bit. So the first component of it is the trauma-informed part. We focus on this a lot in this program, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot on it because I really want to talk about the universal design for learning aspects of it. I might have a little friend coming in here in a second. My son's roaming around. Anyway, so we're going to talk about the trauma-informed component a little bit. Just for a second. So we sort of base the 6 principles of our teaching styles are based off of the SAMHSA's, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Association's approach to trauma-informed care. We just merged their principles into our teaching philosophy. So the 6 principles of trauma-informed care, or trauma-informed care is, if you hear animal noises back there, it's because my son's getting our guinea pigs out right now. Okay, so safety. We always want to ensure that our students feel as safe as humanly possible. Not safe, period. Safe as humanly possible. I am fairly certain given the systems that we work in, it is almost impossible to make everyone feel entirely safe, given all the things that we're dealing with and all the elements. So safety, but we want people to feel as safe as possible. Okay, whatever that means. Trustworthiness and transparency. Our students may never trust us, and that's okay. We just have to be okay with that, but we have to have trusting behavior, okay, as professionals. We try to be as transparent as possible. We try to tell people if there's changes in any schedules, or if there's a personnel change, or if someone's leaving. We have interns that come and go. Anyway, got a kid here. Let's see here. We also have peer support and mutual self-help. So our peer support, we like the kids to start to collaborate with each other, and we like them to have a joint relationship with each other. So many of our teaching components will also be peer-to-peer, so they learn how to have positive relationships with their peers. Empowerment, voice, and choice. We always give choices, no matter if it's in yoga or when I'm teaching them maybe something about the iPad or Braille. They always have choices. Let's see here. What else do we have? We also try to bring family members involved as well and give them voices and choices. Everyone has a voice and a choice. But we do, in our trauma-informed teaching approach, we still have we have boundaries though, okay? And sometimes after we've built a appropriate level of trust, maybe they don't trust us wholly, but they trust us in the experience. We do have boundaries, and because you have to, and we do have to inform them of the boundaries lots of times, because there's a lot of pushing and power struggles that still exist, even though that they love us. There's still those power struggles, because they're not always in a healed state. So we always have to remind them of the boundaries within the program and within our relationship all the time. But we're still, while we have those boundaries, we're still give them voice and choice. And of course, we always give cultural, historical, and we always keep in mind cultural, historical, and gender issues as much as humanly possible. We take into consider racial history. We take into consideration who we are as white people, because all of us are white, who are in charge of this, and how we come off to the majority of the people in our yoga program, and my students are people of color. So we realize we bring some historical trauma with us when we come in to the program. So we have to be aware of that in the way this whole dynamic, okay? So that's kind of the historical aspects and the cultural aspects that it directly, and the disability part. We have to be aware of ableism too. So we have to look at race and disability, and obviously the historical ramifications of those, of the race issue as well, and the disability. So we're kind of counteracting two different things and power struggles within the program we have. So it gets interesting. We just have to be really mindful and have our own self-care practices and our own meditation practices in place, so we're all kind of healthy, so we kind of know keep the scales as balanced as possible. Okay, so that's our trauma-informed teaching approach. Our other approach that we have to blend is the universal design for learning approach. Natasha can talk to you all about how this affects yoga, considering she built an entire yoga business around universal design for yoga. I'm going to talk about it from like a very global learning perspective, but she can talk about it more specifically of how this universal design for learning principles applies to yoga specifically. This is based off the UD Learning Center and the 3 principles of universal design for learning. So this is how we make yoga accessible for everyone, no matter who you are. Okay, it's not even, so we base it off of the 3 principles of universal design for learning. Principle 1 is providing multiple means of representation. Sorry if you hear my son talking in the background. It's the what of learning. How are our students perceiving that we're saying? If they're visually impaired, then we have to offer things in Braille. If they are, what's it called?
And guinea pigs.
And we have guinea pigs, by the way. And let's see here. We also have to look at language and expressions. Some things are vague for our students. Like some of our students are very concrete learners, and sometimes yoga is really vague, so we really have to use really concrete language when we are talking. And then we also have to keep into consideration comprehension, okay? All of these things is how we have to, we need to blend into our approach to teaching. So perception, language and expression and symbols, and comprehension, okay? We need to make our yoga accessible to our students based off of that principle. That's number one. 2, we have to provide multiple means of action and representation, and this is the how of learning, okay? So for our students that have physical access issues, we have to figure out how are they going to access a yoga pose, or how are they going to physically access maybe some yoga cards that are visual. Obviously it's tactile, but we have to figure that piece out. Expression and communication. This isn't in our yoga program necessarily, but some of our students, because of trauma, have a hard time communicating because they're frozen. And it also affects their ability to communicate to us. So we have to look at their, how are they going to express to us what they have learned. Executive function, I could go on and on about executive function. I'm not going to touch that right now, because I could touch that later. But we have to look at executive functioning as well with this. So that's principle 2, providing multiple means of action and expression that includes everyone, okay, in our approach. So the other thing we're looking at in principle 3 is of universal design for learning is providing multiple means of engagement. This is the why of learning, okay? How are we going to get all people of all disabilities and all social emotional levels interested in what we're doing, okay? Whether I'm embedding yoga into a Braille lesson or an accessibility lesson, or whether Natasha is teaching them as a group. Sustaining effort and persistence. How are we going to keep the momentum going? Okay? How are we going to keep them engaged? Okay? Outside of after the honeymoon's over, because the honeymoon gets over with after a while. Like they're totally, there's a whole push and pull with this yoga stuff. And then self-regulation. How are we going to engage them in their own self, with the self-regulation? How are we going to teach them to self-regulate so they can be engaged in the learning process? So, okay. So in review, let me go through this because this is new. A lot of people aren't familiar with universal design for learning. So 3 principles of universal design for learning. Provide multiple means of representation. It's the what of learning, okay? How are our students, what are our students learning? How are they perceiving what we're learning? 2, providing multiple means of action and expression, okay? How are they going to be learning this, okay? What physical actions are they going to take? What are they going to say, okay? And then principle 3 is provide multiple means of engagement. This is the why are they learning this, okay? How are we going to recruit interest, okay? So those are our 2 principles that we bring together into our yoga program. And I'm actually going to post in the comments Natasha's beautiful essay she wrote last fall about how she combines these universal design for learning and trauma-informed yoga into the same yoga lessons, okay? It's a really great essay, and I really want her voice in this. So I will post that, but that is part 2. Next week, we're going to go into data and funding. So anyway, that is part 2 of our philosophy and our strategies, or our teaching philosophy. And again, the really big thing I want to say is we do not differentiate. We don't differentiate between the way I teach them or the way Natasha teaches them. This is just our philosophy now, okay? There's no yoga teaching philosophy. I teach yoga when I teach kids, okay? So, I mean, obviously I'm not teaching asanas necessarily, but we're taking the yoga expression and the UDL expression and we're doing it all together, okay? Like, in a flow. So this is just the way we are now, and the way we teach and the way we approach all learning between Bonnie, Natasha, and I. So that is it. I will post Natasha's essay in the comments. Feel free to ask any questions based off of what you heard, and I'll also post the trauma-informed 6 principles of trauma-informed care and the UDL Center. 3 principles of universal design for learning, so you can read more about that approach as well. And so anyway, have a good one. I will talk to you guys next week.